gentlemen, it's time for another round of Mind Your Puckin' Business with your host, Jeffrey Princeton.
Thank you very much, Dougie Sticks. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you're picking up this episode. Coming to you from the beautiful studios of Undefeated Media here in Bergen County, New Jersey. This is the Mind Your Puckin' Business podcast, brought to you, of course, by our good friends at the Bamboozle Project. We encourage you, as always, to check them out. That website is across the screen, thebamboozleproject.com. While you're there, make sure you use special promo code MYPB to save yourself 25% off. And I will tell you that the hats on there, the winter hats, which are always the best-selling item, may be needed, because I did see this morning, if you listen to us in the Northeast, that this weekend is going to be very, very cold.
5 degrees.
So
50 degrees yesterday, 5 degrees this weekend.
Now, I don't want to promise that if you ordered it today, and we're taping this episode on Tuesday, January 31st, that the hat would be here in time. I mean, it might not. But I will tell you this, if you order it, whenever it's cold out, you will be thankful you did. You can check that out along with all the other gear at thebamboozleproject.com. You can send us your questions at any time or throughout the week, even when we're not live. And that email address that we check often is mypbshow@gmail.com. You can also DM us on our Instagram page at Mind Your Puckin' Business. And we also try to do a good job, and I think we do. We're not perfect, but we do try to do a good job of interacting with comments on the posts that come on the Instagram page. So we do try to correspond with you that way. So if you have any questions, you can even probably put them in a comment on one of our Ranger posts, and chances are one of us, but I would say, well, not one of us. If it's a Ranger post, chances are it would be me that will take that right? If it was
or we'll take that question and answer it live on the show.
Or we could take an answer live. But if it was something where it was you know, like not Ranger related, it could be either of us. You get your pick of the
I'll
litter.
take the Giants ones.
Yes, you could, which we'll get to. And you can check us out and listen to our episodes either live on YouTube. You could watch them on a replay on YouTube, or conveniently on your streaming platforms of iTunes and Spotify. You can check us out at any time on those at your leisure. We had someone the other day who wrote to us on our DM page that they like to stream our episodes. I don't think they said if it was Spotify or iTunes, in the car. So, you know, you plug in your little Apple CarPlay if you have an iPhone, and there you go. You slide right in.
Yeah.
So
we're everywhere. We
try. So how's everything with you? Did you get to watch the games this weekend?
Yes.
What did you think?
It's unfortunate that the San Francisco 49ers have gone through 4 quarterbacks in a season. Never seen anything like it. With that being said, at full health, I think they're the better team. And then with the Cincinnati Bengals, congratulations to the referees making the Super Bowl.
I'm not going to go down that angle. I mean, Cincinnati had chances to win the game without the referees. I don't like to blame officiating. Now, I don't know. Full disclosure, on the side, I picked up refereeing hockey, right? Yes. And I think what it is giving me a little bit as a parent of a kid who plays sports, or a coach who coaches your kids to sports, I don't like to blame the refs. It has to be blatant. Now, I will say this. Yes. You may not like that late hit call on Cincinnati at the end of the game on Patrick Mahomes. And you can maybe say in that situation, maybe you keep your flag in your pocket. Okay, I can live with that. Yeah. But it was a late hit. Like I mean, it's clear as day. It's a late hit. I don't know what to tell you.
If you watch the replay, they're both running. He kind of trips, and it's like a one-handed thing. It's a contact sport. And that's not the only situation or call that was questionable. The second chance third down, where literally they ran the play, was like 3rd and 9. They ran the play, incomplete pass. Everybody, both teams, no one's complaining. They're doing 4th down. The kicking team's out there, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no!" One referee in the corner were waving his hands. It was just
again. I don't know. And okay, the 3rd down play. You want to get on the officials? You have a point. However, again, I just look at it always as to say there were other opportunities in that game for them to win. Don't do a late hit on the quarterback when you didn't need to. and you probably have a decent chance, at least, of going overtime and taking a coin. So we'll see. We'll cover the Super Bowl here as we always do. We were talking here in the studio before we went on that it's a very intriguing game in the Northeast because everyone outside of Philly probably wants Philly to lose, ourselves included. Like I've never had an affinity or a hatred to the Kansas City Chiefs. They've always just been neutral to me. Like I don't like them. I don't hate them, but I can tell you next Sunday, I will like them.
Yes. 100%.
As will probably all of the New York. Well, not
all of America.
I don't know about that.
Yes.
Are the Chiefs? Let me ask you this before we switch to hockey.
Yes.
Is there now every team like the Patriots are hated in other markets? Okay, the Eagles are hated in other markets. Yes. I'd even say New York teams are hated in other markets because New York can be hated, right?
Yes.
As the Kansas City Chiefs, is there like anywhere they're hated? I mean, outside of like Denver, maybe where their rival plays or something like that. It's not really a franchise you would hate. It's hard to hate Patrick Mahomes. It's hard to hate Andy Reid.
I mean, yeah, they're harder to hate. Philly is a lot easier to hate. I feel like it's comparisons. For example, like Joe Burrow and Cincinnati Bengals versus Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I was rooting for the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I'd rather see the Bengals win than if you watch Patrick Mahomes, like he'll mess up and he'll have a bad play and he'll get hit down and then he jumps up and he's like,
yeah, he does that.
I hate that thing. Sorry.
But you will want.
But I'm going to root for him.
You're going to root for him next week
because I can hate him less.
And you're going to want to see him doing that hand motion.
Yeah, I hate that hand motion.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, man, we're the linemen. We've been protecting your butt all day. Don't tell me to get up when you just when you just messed up.
We say this here every year, and somehow, some way, this is our third year covering football on this podcast. And we say it all the time, and it's completely true, that there is no season. It's not even close out of the four major sports that goes as fast as the NFL season.
It's nuts.
You think like we were all just doing fantasy football drafts, which we seem to just have been doing, and it being week 1 and preseason predictions. And right now, 30 of the 32 teams are done. There's only 2 teams left in one game. And then it hits you when football ends that Sunday after, and you're just like, whoa. You're not going to sit there and watch the NBA game of the week between the Clippers and the Rockets. I mean, you're just not. Yeah. It doesn't get you, in the same light that the regular NFL season does, for sure. I mean, so we'll see. I mean, it'll be an interesting game. We'll cover it a lot next week. I mean, that's the beauty of the 2-week gap that we have the opportunity to, spend some time, see how Patrick Mahomes' ankle is, see if Travis Kelce's back acts up, and go from there. But the line in Vegas is close, -2. So Vegas is saying you're going to get a good game for sure. We're going to bring in our guest right now, and we're going to welcome him to the show. And those of you that follow hockey, which a lot of our followers do, you're going to know him right away. And that is EJ Hradek. He's the senior reporter for NHL Network. He's all over the place. We love EJ. EJ, how are you?
I'm good. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly. How are you?
Oh, beautiful. I'm good. You guys got a nice setup there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I don't think we're too far from where you live. If you ever want to come in live in studio, we'd love to have you.
Where are you?
We're in Bergen County, right over the bridge. So we are not that far at all. So thank you.
That's a possibility.
We will be here. We'll have the Dunkin' Donuts waiting for you. You just let us know what you like in your coffee. So let me ask you some questions. I'm going to start. Obviously, we're a Ranger-focused podcast. I have some Ranger questions for you, and then we'll go around the league a little bit. Let's start here with the Rangers. An interesting season so far. I felt like last year they were almost on autopilot the whole season. This year, the start was really bad. December was bad. They've kind of turned it around. Do you think at any point before the Trouba throwing the helmet incident, which kind of seems to be the marking point when things turned around, do you think Gerard Gallant's job was ever in jeopardy here?
I'll tell you what, surprisingly, I do think that there was some thought within upper management that maybe they would have to make a change. I talked to some people that told me that when I talked to some people, I talked to people that in the industry that would have an idea. And because I was curious about it, because I was hearing those rumblings, and they said, the club had discussions, or had reached out. I'm trying to, trying to say this in the right way, but had reached out to see if there would be interest in some other guys if it came open. And that's what happens typically in these situations, that when when upper management, when a general manager feels like, hey, this is going in the wrong direction, we may have to make a change, they start to kind of do some work behind the scenes to see who might be available, and if indeed they could even get permission to speak to that person. So there was a little of that, from what I understand, going on. I was really surprised, and that's kind of why I kind of inquired about it, because let's face it, as you guys know, that Jordan Gallant was just starting his second year with the Rangers, and he had a wildly successful first season. They went to the conference final, and they got within 6 games of winning a Stanley Cup, really 6 wins. So I was really surprised to hear that. But in this business, it's a winning business, and things can change fast. And as we see, things have changed fast, because the Rangers kind of got back on track and got their season kind of in order, and here we are. But I think that I would say, to kind of sum it up, that that none of these coaches really are safe for that long, and we'll have to see how things play out for the Rangers. I think this season is not something as a surprise to me. I felt like you make a lot of predictions, guys, to start the season. This year has been a crazy year. I was wrong on most of them, but on the Rangers, I think I've been more right than wrong, in that I thought there would be more adversity for the Rangers this year. Everybody kind of knows they're coming this year. They're one of the top teams in the league, and so there have been more bumps along the way than there were last year. I think that adversity, though, could help them when we get to the postseason.
Okay, so last year, the Rangers, very active at the trade deadline, brought in two of the bigger names, or that worked for them, Frank Vatrano and Andrew Copp. Now, if any Ranger fan tells you that the day they traded for Frank Vatrano, they knew who he was, they're lying, because myself included, I had to Google it. I didn't know who he was. I certainly knew who Andrew Copp was. Who do you think? Chris Drury's got to be active here at the trade deadline, as we're now 4 weeks away. Who do you think may be this year's Vatrano or Copp for them that's out there?
Boy, it's hard to say, because we saw the Islanders pull the trigger on the big trade for Bo Horvat, right? So that was we knew Bo Horvat would likely be traded. I didn't think he was going to be traded before February 1st, just because of everybody's kind of cap circumstances around the league. But that trade shows you that you can make things work. Pavillier was moved to Vancouver. The Canucks ate some of the salary, so they made it work. You have to start going around and looking at the teams that are kind of that are out of it right now, or teams that are going to be sellers, so to speak. And last year, for example, the Rangers also got Tyler Mott from the Vancouver Canucks. So that was a guy that was available, that was a helpful player. He ended up getting hurt, played some, had some impact. I think Ranger fans would have liked to keep him, based on kind of the scuttle that you heard. But in the end, they didn't have the money to keep him, just like they didn't have the money to keep the other two guys you mentioned, and so the roster was shuffled. So I off the top of my head, trying to think of guys who were available, I'm not so sure. If I had the stats pack in front of me, I could kind of go through some of those teams. But I think Chris Drury has got his eye on a lot of different guys. Obviously Patrick Kane's name has been mentioned. There's a lot of others. I think that I like the Rangers group. I got to be honest. I think that I like their top nine. I think they could use some help with a better kind of bottom six player, somebody that gives them a more identity, or kind of fits that role better. Maybe, and that might still be somebody that comes from within their group down in Hartford. But off the top, it's hard for me to give you a name. But I'm sure that the Rangers are going to be inquiring. They're going to be active as best they can, depending on their cap situation. That's for sure. But I like their group. I think especially on defense. I love Keandre Miller. I think the other guys, I think we all know, and you know who they are. This is a really good group. They got a great goalie. I think there's a lot to like about the Rangers. I just think that the 82-game season can be tricky, and there definitely were going to be bumps this year, and we've seen them.
Okay, so the Horvat trade, which you mentioned, coming from Vancouver all the way, that's a long flight too when you've been traded. Right? You're going about as far as you could be from Long Island to come from Vancouver. Do you
Yeah.
think that puts more pressure now on other teams in the Metro Division to really get the players they're targeting, knowing that he's in the division now?
Well, I think everybody's in a different circumstance, right, guys? And the cap is what the cap is. I think, and you go back to last year, right? Like Chris Drury, or excuse me, Claude Giroux was like a big fish, right? That a lot of teams were interested. He ended up going to the Florida Panthers. In the end, it didn't really make a big difference for the Panthers, and it really wasn't. It looked like what they needed. You need to get somebody that's gonna fill a hole you need. Like Carolina, I thought Bo Horvat would really end up in Carolina, to be honest with you, because they need a second center, and it seems like Bo Horvat in the best situation is really a good second center. I don't see him necessarily as a one. He's kind of maybe a 1B or a 2 in a good situation. And in some teams, maybe with a really good team, he could be a 3. But um, so yeah, I mean there'll be some pressure, but I think the managers have to do what makes sense for their teams. Because to go back to Giroux, I mean the Panthers, thought that was what they needed. When you go back and look at the Panthers, and even this year, like the holes they have are on defense, in my mind. And so they went out and added a really good forward and a guy that had a lot of upside to his game, although he's an older player. But it wasn't really what they need. So there may be pressure in each market. People might say, well, Horvat's off the market. What other guys are out there? Who are we competing with to get players? It's got to be in the end. It doesn't have to be the biggest fish on the market. It has to be something that fits your team. What do you need to be better? And that will be, I think, what determines it. Like Colorado is another team, they could use as second center. They were another team that, may have been in the mix for Bo Horvat, but now maybe they turn their attention to a Ryan O'Reilly or a Jonathan Toews or someone of that ilk that could slide in on a short term and who's kind of a rental that could fit that role for them. So, I think every market is different. The managers, I think that the good managers understand that it's about fit more than, just trying to accumulate assets. I think Ranger fans who've been around a while can remember that Rangers team from like 97 to 04 when there was no cap. And the Rangers acquired a lot of assets at that time, and really it didn't do them a heck of a lot of good. I don't think they made the playoffs in that span. You got to find someone that fits. So I think that will be the key for Drury and for all the managers, regardless of whatever pressure they feel to get players.
Yeah, the name that comes back to me when you just gave that example was Bobby Holik. I remember them signing him on July 2nd and just never going anywhere. I'm going to bring in a live question that just came in from someone for
Okay.
you, and that is, EJ, do you think the Rangers are more likely to go to a Vetrano type on the market or a big name hunting someone like Kane, I guess?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing about Patrick Kane, and we don't know what he wants to do, right? He is going to probably be able to dictate to a large degree what happens before the trade deadline because he's an iconic player for the Chicago Blackhawks. His contract is expiring. I think the Hawks would love to move both Kane and Taves based on the direction they're going. Try to get something for those guys because they seem like they're in a complete tear down rebuild mode there in Chicago. So I think that's what the club would prefer. I think because of the stature of those players, it's a delicate circumstance. So I think they want to respect both of those players. So I think that the Rangers would be really interested in Kane because of his connection with Panarin. And you saw last year, Strome had the really good connection with Panarin, and they had a good chemistry. He's gone now. They've brought in Trocheck. Trocheck, I don't think is maybe as good a fit. So they've been kind of trying to tinker with where that all is going to play. I think the key guy in all this may be Filipino, because I think Filipino, to me, when I look at their roster, is really the second center on that team. I see Trocheck as more of a 3. But where do they feel that, hey, we'd be better off trying to get Kane, play the kids together, and kind of work around that roster and hope that chemistry with Kane and Panarin could be something that moves us forward. And then of course, what do the Blackhawks want? Does Kane want to come? What do the Blackhawks want in return? Do we have those kind of assets to give the Blackhawks? Are we willing to part with those kind of assets? So those are all the questions that are involved. In the end, as I mentioned, Kane will have a lot to do with it. So when you ask me, are they go more big game hunting or looking for Vetrano type? I think And again, this is a question that only Chris Drury and the guys in that room could answer, because there's a lot of speculation by all of us in the media about, well, they want to get Patrick Kane. Maybe they're not as interested in Patrick Kane, or as interested as we think they are, but there's no denying the fact that Kane and Panarin had a great chemistry in Chicago when they played together. The Rangers, if they could add him to the mix, I think the biggest reason why the kid line had so much success last year in the playoffs is the Rangers have a really strong top nine anyway, and especially with those guys that they lost. And so it was hard to check, certainly the kid line. By the time you got to them, you really didn't have your best checkers to play against them, and I think they took advantage of that. So, I guess for me, yeah, they're always looking for little pieces to help your group, but, within that room, and when I look at that team, if they could get Kane and put him together with Panarin and really make that upgrade there and make it really hard for opponents to check you, and they have a guy that can come in and has familiarity with a player, I think that would, to me, that would probably make some sense, but that's going to be up to Chris Drury.
So one of the hot topics we've had here on the show, we've had people write in about it, comment, is Alexis Lafrenière. I go back to that Monday afternoon in August in 2020 when it was roasting hot outside and hockey was the last thing on our mind. And we tuned into this draft lotto and we watched the ball come out with the Rangers logo. 1 of 8 chance, and they got it.
Yeah.
And Alexis Lafrenière, when he came here, it seemed, and maybe now this wasn't fair, was billed as the next coming of Moses, this generational talent. His stats in Canada were similar to what Sidney Crosby's were when he played in that league. It hasn't, I don't want to say it hasn't worked out. It's just maybe taking some time. At the end of the day, we had asked Dan Rosen this a couple weeks ago when he was with us. When we look back in 10 years at Alexis Lafreniere's career with the Rangers, what do you think it is?
Boy, that's a really good question and a tough one to answer, because most guys, when they get picked that high, end up in situations where the team isn't very good and they're rushed into the league. And sometimes the first year is okay, but it usually takes a little time. But they're in all those they're in, as time goes on, they're clearly in their top 6, and they're clearly, almost always clearly on their top line, which means they play in all offensive situations and they play on the power play and they get all those chances to put up points. In this case, Lafrenière was drafted by a team that had a lot of good forwards, and so it's been a struggle for him to be in those offensive situations on a consistent basis, right? So therefore, he's not getting those opportunities to really put up points. Now, going back to his draft year, I mean, he was he was the top guy in that draft class, but I would not say you can compare him to where McDavid was, or where Matthews was, or even where Connor Bedard is this year. I think he was, the clear top pick in his draft year at that time. Maybe like a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was, who ended up going to the Oilers, and some others, and some that hadn't worked out as well. So, I think that Alexis Lafrenière is a good player. I think it's hard to read how things are going to play out for him until he gets consistently put in those offensive situations. And with the Rangers, let's face it, Panarin is going to be in those situations. And you look at their power play. Kreider's at the front of the net. Panarin is on there. Zibanejad is on there. Fox is on there. I mean, there's not a lot of room for other pieces to fit on that power play, at least on the top unit. So when you ask me, how is his career going to play out in 10 years? I don't know. I think it really depends on what the Rangers do with other personnel. And we're just talking about Patrick Kane. If they go and get a Patrick Kane, well, maybe Alexis Lafrenière is part of the deal going the other way. I think for him, based on the roster as it is, it might be better for him personally to be somewhere else. But he's a good player, and like we've seen with others, like Jack Hughes, his first year was tough. He's kind of taken off, and now he's a legit superstar in this league. It does take time sometimes for these guys to develop, but I think Lafrenière is in a really unusual position because he's a guy who was picked so high in the draft that is not getting the offensive. He's not being put in the offensive situations on his team that some players in that same situation would be put in. I mean, Tim Stützle with Ottawa is getting more of those offensive looks, and his career is kind of taken off more, but he's in a situation where he's getting those chances.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That, usually when you're drafted first because the team's not good and there's not a lot of talent behind you. That situation was unique. So you just gave me the perfect segue to the next question I had for you when
All
you
right.
mentioned Jack Hughes. We'll leave the Ranger world for a minute. I was waiting, and I've been waiting for them to drop off, come back to earth, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Are the Devils at a point now where they can really make a deep run in the playoffs?
Well, I mean, they are really fun to watch, and they play with a lot of pace and a lot of speed, and they can score. There's no question about that. And they put you on your heels. Even when they played the Rangers this year in the 3 games, and I got to watch most of all 3 games. I called one of them for the NHL Network on the Saturday afternoon showcase game from the Rock, where the Rangers had the lead and the Devils rallied to win. That series has been that way. The team that had the lead in each game ended up losing the game. But even the Rangers, I was surprised. They were on their heels. And I think the Rangers have a pretty quick team and have a really like a nimble defense. The Devils are fun to watch. I think the Devils could easily go on a long playoff run, but I think it's competitive just as easily as they could go to the conference final or maybe beyond. They could get knocked out in the first round. That's just the nature of the competitive level of the league. But they are a unique challenge for teams because they could knock you back with the speed. I think their group of defensemen is pretty good. I'll be curious to see what they do with Luke Hughes when his season ends at Michigan, if he's going to jump in and get a chance to play at all. I think he's got he needs, I think, some time, especially with his defensive zone play. Although he's a really talented offensive-minded defenseman, he's obviously a big part of their future. But I think a lot would depend for the Devils on how Vanacek and/or Blackwell play in goal. I mean, Vanacek has been really the much more consistent of the two guys, and he's having a very good year. I mean, if the Devils can get consistent goaltending in the postseason, and I think they'll be there, they're going to be a hard out. Now, it doesn't mean I think they're going to go on a long run. I just think that they're because of the way they play, because of the speed, because of the fact they can score goals, and I think their defense is good enough. They're going to be a pain in the neck for somebody in the playoffs if they remain healthy, because like I said, they may be the fastest team in the league, and they want to go. And I remember talking to a coach earlier in the year that his team played against them, and he told me, he said, "Hey, the Devils might be the best team in the league," and I was like, "Whoa." I mean, I think we're a little early there. And he goes, "No, he goes, believe me," he goes, "they're really good and they're hard to deal with." So it'll be interesting to watch them as the rest of the season unfolds, and if they can stay healthy. Like all the teams, you need to stay healthy.
Yeah, and you have to feel good for Lindy Ruff. I mean, you had the fans chanting, wanting him out, and then to go
Yeah.
on that streak. And I mean, he's a good guy. Lindy Ruff's been around forever. Yeah, he's a good
Oh
guy.
yeah.
So you
Yeah,
have to be happy
absolutely.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple more questions before we let you go. So the
All right.
situation in Vancouver a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't have a reason for this. I've always had a soft spot for Bruce Boudreau. Never coached the Rangers, but I've always liked him. Thought he was a good guy. The
Yeah.
thing that I can't understand, and maybe you can tell me how this happened. Jim Rutherford, the general manager out there, this is not his first rodeo. He's been in Carolina. He's
Yeah.
been in Pittsburgh. So I can't, for the life of me, I figure out how someone so experienced in the league allowed this to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's one you'd have to probably really, really have to have a long conversation with Jim to try to figure that one out, because I think you're absolutely right about everything. Bruce is a terrific person. I've gotten to know Bruce during his time at the NHL Network when he was one of our colleagues, and I believe he's going to be coming back to join us soon. So I'm really excited about that. Our whole team is excited about that, because you're right, Bruce is a terrific guy. And he's a hockey guy, and he's authentic. I mean, what you see is what you get with Bruce, and he's been a really good coach in the league. I mean, when you look at his career as an NHL coach with Washington, Anaheim, Minnesota, and Vancouver, I mean, I think he's fourth among active coaches with points percentage, and I mean, he is high on a lot of lists when it comes to success as an NHL coach. So you have to go back, I think, to how this all started in Vancouver last year. The owner, Francisco Aquilini, the Aquilini family, reached out when they were making a coaching change. They hired Bruce Boudreau. They had let go of Travis Green, who they had the previous summer signed to a contract extension. So, that was no small thing to then let a guy go there that closely after that and have to be on the hook for paying him, and then bring in a head coach. So they brought in Bruce before they hired Jimmy Rutherford. And from when you read the accounts, Jimmy was under the impression that Bruce was on a one-year deal that was kind of to the end of last season. In the end, what was the case was that Bruce was on a 1-1 with an option for both sides to renew. And so after the successful run that Bruce had, where the team really got turned around and they nearly made the playoffs and it was a good finish to the season, there was a lot of pressure publicly to bring Bruce back, as there would be, because he's a popular guy and the team had success and there was high hopes, like there are in all markets when you have a strong finish, to kind of pick up where you left off. There was a number of openings, as you guys know, last summer. I think there was 8 openings. So Bruce, I think, was interested in coming back to Vancouver. That was his first choice. He wanted to get an extension of sorts, even just another year at the end of his contract, not to be a lame duck coach. Jimmy Rutherford didn't want that. Said, listen, you got to we want you back, but only on the existing one-year deal. There was some back and forth there. In the end, Bruce decided to go back to Vancouver. But I don't get the sense that Bruce was ever really Jimmy's choice to be the head coach there. And he said some things in the media going back to the end of last season that really undermined, I felt, the coach in some ways. He talked about the lack of structure. He talked about that in training camp again. And it seemed like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy from the start with Jimmy Rutherford, because he just never was really all that supportive publicly of his coach, which is really unusual. If you look around the league, as you guys know, I mean, Chris Drury doesn't say anything. So,
Right.
I mean, we talked before about Gerard Gallant, right? Like, you asked me about it. I tell you what I was able to cull from different people that I trust, but it wasn't easy to kind of really to get a handle on that, because Chris doesn't say anything publicly, which is probably the best move for a manager. Not always great for us. We want to hear from these guys and kind of pick their brain. But the bottom line is, I don't think that Bruce was ever Jimmy's guy. Things didn't unfold well in Vancouver this year. They started the first 6 or 7 games where they blew leads. I mean, it was kind of crazy. Opening night against the Oilers, they had a 3-0 lead. They blew that lead. They blew leads in Philadelphia and Columbus, and I mean, just about every city in the Northeast they blew leads in, and so they got off behind the 8 ball. Thatcher Demko got hurt. Their defense, which wasn't really good and wasn't really addressed by the manager in the offseason, kind of stumbled. They had 2 really inexperienced goalies there with Colin Delia and Spencer Martin, and things just took a downward spiral. So I know some of these answers have been long-winded, but I would just tell you that, I think that in the end, Bruce was never Jimmy's guy. I think if Jimmy had more courage of his convictions last summer, he would have said to Bruce, listen, we're going to pass, and I'm going to go and try to hire someone else. But I think, again, there was success there, pressure in the market. I think it would have been hard for Jimmy to walk away from Bruce at that time. So, in Vancouver, I find there's just a lot of different agendas, like who's the manager? Is it Patrick Alvin? Is it Jim Rutherford? They've got a number of assistant GMs. They've got ownership with concerns. Now they're paying 3 different coaches. So I think they've got a lot to unravel there in Vancouver, and I think it's going to take some time. And it might not be Jimmy Rutherford that's the guy that's able to unravel it, but to say that the situation played out poorly is kind of an understatement. And in the end, Bruce still remains a terrific guy, and I'd love to see him get another opportunity to coach if that's possible. But we're excited to have him back at some point soon on the NHL Network, and we'll see how Rick Tocchet does in Vancouver. I don't think Rick is as good a head coach as Bruce. He hasn't had as much experience. I think Rick is best suited as a really good assistant coach. But you know what? He's going to go in there. Rick had a lot of success for a long time as a player. He's been around teams. He's had coaching experience. At the end of the day, guys, the players are what makes the difference. If you don't have the horses, you're hard to win. Hopefully he gets Thatcher Demko back. That'll help him a lot, and they've got to fix that defense because it's really problematic.
Yeah, staying north of the border, let's go east to Toronto.
Okay.
Cannot get out of the first round every year. I mean, it's almost like we've seen the script before, good regular season. Do the Maple Leafs need to get out of the first round to save Sheldon Keefe and the coach up there, Sheldon Keefe, and Kyle Dubas's job?
They need to get out of the Atlantic Division is what they need to do, right? I mean, because that division, it's cyclical, all these things, because then we have conversations, well, is the NHL playoff system, is it fair? Is it the way they have it set up? Could they do it better? I don't know. I just know this, that the league is cyclical, and sometimes, any system you come up with, it's not going to be perfect. And the system we have in place now, I mean, for the last couple of years, Boston, Toronto, Tampa are three of what, guys? The best 5, 6, 7 teams in the league. So, and then Florida last year was the President's Trophy winner. So you threw them into the mix last year. So the way the playoffs are structured, it's a hard division to come out of. And for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think if nothing else so far this year, I think we could almost pencil in a first round matchup, Toronto and Tampa. So that's going to be hard. The Tampa Bay Lightning have gone to the Cup final 3 consecutive years, and they won the Cup 2 years in a row before losing last year to Colorado. And listen, right now they're on a home winning streak. I think they've won 12 straight home games. So this is still a really good team. So the Toronto Maple Leafs have a good team. They're a little top heavy. When you go back to them going out and signing John Tavares several years back, to me, I don't know if that was the best allocation of their money when you consider a salary cap league. Now, at the time, they had no idea that there was going to be a pandemic and there was going to be a flattening of the cap for several years. So that's made it harder for them. I think that this iteration of the Leafs is better than the last couple. I think Sheldon Keefe has more experience as a coach, which I think is really helpful. I think on the blue line, Sandin and Liljegren have played a little bit more. They have like 100-plus NHL games now. Those guys are a little bit better. The top guys in their group are great players, and they're going to, like most teams, right? Those guys are going to have to carry the load. And then in goal this year, they've added Samsonov, and they've added Murray. And those guys have played really well so far. They've kind of taken turns being the guy there. I'm a little worried about Murray's health issues because he seems to get dinged up a lot. But I think they're better in goal than they were last year. So I think against Tampa it'll be hard. They almost beat them last year. It was a 7-game series. They had chances to take them out. They just couldn't figure out that final push. I think they've got a great chance to win this year. So when you ask me, do they have to win to save those jobs? I guess there will be a push if they don't win again. I guess it will be the manner in which it plays out, right? If they were to get swept by Tampa, well, I think at least the head coach probably is in real danger there. If they play another 7-game series that goes right to the end and it's a 1-goal deal, I don't know. I mean, I think there's be huge frustration in the market. There's no question. This team hasn't advanced out of the first round since 2004. There's market pressures that play into this. I know this much. Shanahan hired Dubas. It's been the Shanahan plan all along. Dubas is his guy. I think Dubas has done a really pretty good job in kind of managing things there. I'm not the biggest Sheldon Keefe guy, I'll be honest with you, but I think that like all these coaches, they grow and develop over time. They're like players. They're like you guys. They're like me. We hope to get better over years with the years of experience. So I guess, yeah, if they don't get out of the first round, depending on how it goes, those guys could be in a lot of trouble. But I think it's a tough situation they're in because of the likely first-round opponent. But I think they got a great chance to win. And even if they don't, I'm hard-pressed to say. I mean, we'll have to watch and see how it plays out. If they get dominated, then, yeah, you got big problems.
Right.
I think the bigger overarching issue there probably is what's the future of Matthews there? He's got a couple years left on his deal. He could be an unrestricted free agent, and that obviously changes the dynamic of the whole franchise. So we'll see. I'll tell you what, it's hard shoes to be in because that's a tough first round matchup against one of the best teams in this generation, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, you don't want your job depending on a matchup that is including that.
No, no,
not at all. All right, 2 last prediction questions, and then we'll let you go.
Okay.
The biggest name to get moved at the trade deadline in the NHL this year will be who?
From a name standpoint, I'll stick with Patrick Kane. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know, and again, I don't know what he wants to do personally. I mean, he might be one of those guys who just says, "Listen, I want to be in Chicago. I want to be a player that begins and ends my career there." I think it's going to be tough to do. It's going to wear on him because I don't think that rebuild is a short-term rebuild. So, in the end, I think that maybe he does accept the idea of moving somewhere. So I'll say Patrick Kane, but there's a lot of names. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly is someone that has been a great player, recently a Stanley Cup winner in St. Louis. His contract is up. He's hurt right now, but I think he could easily move. I mean, Vladimir Tarasenko, also of the Blues, has been a very good player for a long time. He's another guy that's been on the market seemingly for years now, but we're getting to the end of his contract. He could move. I just think it's going to be an interesting deadline. I'm surprised, guys. Though I'm really just surprised that the Aller Horvat deal just happened this quickly, just because of everybody's cap circumstance. But again, there's a reminder: when you want to make something happen, you can do it.
Yeah. And I agree. It was interesting that it happened already, right? You would think a deal
Yeah.
like that would have been closer to the deadline. All right, last question, and maybe
All
the
right.
hardest one. Who's
All
coming
right.
out of the East at this moment, if you had to pick? Who's coming out of the West, and who would host Lord Stanley's Cup at the all as we get to the All-Star break? Who do you like?
Well, before the season, I liked the Rangers and the Avalanche to get to the final, and I thought the Rangers were going to win. That was before the season, and I made a lot of bad predictions before the season. I think a lot of people did this year, but it's been kind of a crazy year. I guess it's hard to pick against the Bruins right now. I mean, the way they've played. The problem is, as we've seen this week, and it's a long season, and I want to really drill in on the Bruins for being 0-2-1 in 3 games. Heck, that's half of the games they've lost this year. It seems like they've played so well. But it's just a reminder that the playoffs are tough, and the regular season you bounce from place to place, and a lot of times it's when you play somebody rather than who you play. The schedule could favor you. Guys could be out. Um, a 7 game series is a more difficult challenge, even if you're as good as the Bruins have been all year. And let's say they stay healthy and they're playing the same way. A 7 game series against the same team where they drill down on your strengths and weaknesses is much, much different. But I think it's hard. You'd be hard pressed to go against the Bruins right now, just based on how they've played. You look at their team; both goalies are playing well. Allmark has, been the Vezina Trophy winner to this stage. He has been just lights out good. And when you watch the Bruins play, there's a lot of nights where, he's the difference for the Bruins, and he makes those key saves in big moments on nights when they're not maybe playing as well. So, it's the usual suspects will be there. I mean, the Toronto Tampa winner, right? We just talked about that series. The winner of that series could win the East, right? Those two teams are really good. Carolina, I think, is improved this year. I like the addition of Burns. If Anderson can stay healthy, that's a big factor for them. It's been a problem for him for a while. I do think that they're going to add a piece or two to that puzzle. With Pacioretty being out, they probably have LTI room to do something. I think they could use a second center would make sense for them. We'll see what Don Waddell and that group decides to do there. I really like the Rangers at the start. We talked about the Devils. I don't think Pittsburgh and Washington, if they get in, I just think Pittsburgh hasn't had any playoff success in about 4 years since they back-to-back cups, right? So, and Washington I think they've done very well with the issues they've had there this year with the injuries. They're kind of struggling now, and they've got to figure out, they may have to lose a contract when everybody's healthy, if they get everybody healthy. Buffalo is going to be fun to watch down the road. I think they've got a group of players there that could be very good for a long time as they continue to mature. But I guess I would say Boston in the East. In the West, I mean, Colorado, if when they get all the pieces together, if everybody's healthy, Landeskog comes back and can play, Byram comes back and can play, I mean, they're still pretty loaded. And the fact that with all the guys out, they're still near the top, they're still in the playoff picture. They had a run where they really struggled for 8 games, and now they've had a run leading into the break where they've been much better, and they've been the Avalanche we've suspected that we know they are when they're healthy. So, I think I would still say Colorado, just because when I look at the West, like, who are the other teams there? I like Dallas, but Dallas just seems like, I'm just not ready, I think, to take that leap on Dallas again. And they've been knocking at the door for a couple of years with different iterations of this group. They've got a great goalie at Ottinger, so they have that going for them. In the West, Vegas is banged up. When Vegas is healthy, I think they're a dangerous team when everybody fits there, but they've got inexperienced goaltending. Seattle's been a fun story this year, but I don't know if they're a team that could push through in the playoffs. Edmonton's got the star power up front. I'll be interested to see what Kenny Holland does. Edmonton's a team I would keep an eye on too, because those top guys can really drive it. So, but I think right now I'd probably still stay with Colorado if everyone's healthy, and it's hard to look away from the Bruins.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Jim Montgomery deserves an award
Wow.
for what he's done there. Obviously, he inherited a good team. Or I mean, I'm not saying he took a
Yeah.
team with not talent, but maybe it's just sometimes what a new voice can do or new system
Yeah.
or whatnot. But they
Yeah.
look great, so we'll see if they
Yeah.
get through that.
You know what's interesting about the Bruins, just real quick, is that,
Yeah.
give Donnie Sweeney and Cam Neely and their group a lot of credit, because last year when they fired Bruce Cassidy, my first gut reaction was like, why are they firing Bruce? Oops, I lose you there.
Oh,
I'm
we can
back.
hear you. We just
All right.
go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah.
We're just-
Why would you fire Bruce Cassidy? He had a lot of success there. They went to a Cup final, but in the end, again, like we talked about what the Rangers might have done with their coach and all these different situations with teams. Like, they knew more than we did, and they knew on the inside that Bruce had kind of worn out his welcome there with some of the players, with some of the coaching staff. And it was just time. And it didn't mean that Bruce Cassidy was a bad coach. He's gone on to Vegas and he's done a really nice job there. It just meant it was time. And they went out and brought in Jim Montgomery, and Jim has freed up some of the guys. It's been a fresh start for some of the players. Patrice Bergeron was more likely to come back once they made the change. David Krejci was willing to come back from the Czech Republic once they made the change. I think he's been good for some of the guys, most particularly someone like Jake DeBrusk, who had been kind of bandied about in the trade market. He had asked for a trade. And I just think sometimes you need a new voice. And I think that coach needs a new opportunity. And I thought Boston and Pittsburgh is interesting, guys, because in Boston, they were made a change and it's paid off. And really was no issue with the coach. He's a good coach, but it was time. In Pittsburgh, Mike Sullivan is a great coach. He won 2 consecutive Stanley Cups. They doubled down on Mike Sullivan. He's still there. They brought the same core back. Now, they've had a lot of injuries. We'll see how things go with the Penguins. But I think it's really interesting to look at both those situations. I think the Penguins might have been better suited doing something similar, bringing in someone else, try to create a new voice and a new environment for that group as they try to push at the end of the Crosby era to maybe win one more time. And it would have been no slap, and I say it with no disrespect to Mike, because I think Mike could have gone somewhere else and done a terrific job. Sometimes the players and the coaches just need changes. They need a fresh start. And to your point about Jim Montgomery and why I bring it up, I give those guys credit because they understood what they needed. Jim has come in and done a great job. Good for him, because he had some personal struggles that kind of derailed his career a little bit, but he was a real big factor helping the Blues there as an assistant, and he's been a great head coach in Boston. And again, Bruce Cassidy has done a nice job in Vegas. So give credit to Donnie Sweeney and that group for understanding the situation and having to make a tough decision, because I know that wasn't easy for the Bruins to do.
Yeah, and the backlash that they got publicly from their fan base when they made
Yeah,
that decision was not great. But now in the
absolutely.
end, I mean, like you said, I mean, they certainly knew what they were doing. EJ, we thank you for joining us. That's EJ Hradek,
Yeah.
senior reporter for the NHL Network. You also know him as the host of NHL Now, which if you're home in the afternoons like I am sometimes making dinner for the kids, we always have it on in the background. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And open invitation, always come in the studio whenever you'd like.
That would be nice. Maybe we can do that someday. Thanks for your
You
time,
got it.
guys.
You got it. That is EJ Hradek. So awesome stuff, awesome content.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
You
Awesome.
learned. You probably learned
I
a
learned
lot.
a lot.
The pop
Did.
quiz.
Yeah.
So next week when we are on, we will be within days of the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl matchup with the Chiefs and the Eagles.
Mhm.
We will have time then, because we're already over like the allotted slot we normally go, for you to talk about your problem with a New York City landmark right now.
Wait, so we're not doing it now?
Do you want to do it now?
I
I'll leave
mean,
it up to
it's
you.
fresh now.
Go
Like,
ahead.
it's gonna be old news.
Dougie Sticks, I will give you the floor. I will say this as you warm up your muscles over there.
Yeah.
Doug in the studio before we were live in our
Yes.
pre-show stuff today,
Yes.
certainly expressed his displeasure with a New York City landmark. Doug, would you like to fill the people in?
It is no longer a New York City landmark.
Ooh.
It is now a trash building. Okay. I am sorry, but the Empire State Building, it needs to come down. It just needs to come down. I mean, whoever's in charge of the social media account, whoever chose to put the Philadelphia Eagles team colors on the New York City skyline, they need to be fired. They have no context. They have no sanity. They have no intelligence. It is baffling to me how in a world where you have rivalries, you have competition. You need to strive for something. You need to you want to win. You need to work hard, whatever. And then you put the Philadelphia Eagles team colors on the Empire State Building. That's like if we went down and put a Giants jersey on Rocky Balboa's statue. Like you just don't like. It's just what are you doing? If the Yankees won the World Series, do you think any building or establishment in Boston would be putting Yankee colors up or a Yankee tribute? Like what are you doing?
So I was not. I was annoyed by it. I don't think I went to the level of annoyance that you are, but I understand it because when I did see it happen, I was definitely surprised. Like I don't know what the logic is going on in the person's head as they're deciding what colors to light it up, because a lot of times, I'm sure you know this, the Empire State Building is lit like in charitable causes. Like I know in October, Breast Cancer Month, it's Pink Along Nights. I mean, it really can be used as a good platform to get a message out and a message that resonates with the people that see it. To put the Eagles green colors after the Eagles advance to the Super Bowl, it definitely is peculiar.
A message out, okay? Keyword there, a message out. So, like, unfortunately, we lost Kobe Bryant, right? You could put the Lakers colors up for that. When DeMar Hamlin, right? DeMar got injured. You could put Buffalo's color up. We're wishing him well, but not fly Eagles fly. Let's go win the Super Bowl when they just beat us the week before. Like it's like no, we want them to lose.
You know what I'm going to use, and then we'll let the people go because they've been with us. This is now probably the longest episode we've ever had. You are a lot more enraged by it than our executive producer, Pat, who hates the Eagles because he went to school in Philadelphia and he's a Giant fan. I mean, Pat, before the show, when we were talking about it, he was annoyed, but you are clearly like a step above.
Okay.
So,
this is a good trait to have. So this is no offense to Pat, but like, it takes a little more for him, I think, to get enraged. Or he has better control of those enraging.
Possible.
Like I let it fly, baby. Like no, you Philadelphia Eagles, like you have no part on our skyline. I am sorry. Go home, and whoever's running that building, you're fired. Whoever's on social media, and the social media account is like antagonizing people, antagonizing Dave Portnoy, and antagonizing people. And you know what? King Kong should have destroyed that building when he had the chance.
Well, we will see next week. Hopefully, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I say hopefully because, like I said earlier in the show today, most of America, I would think, is not rooting for the Eagles. Hopefully, the Kansas City Chiefs will do a job a week and a half from now that will not even give the Empire State Building staff the opportunity to even think about it. We appreciate you tuning in today. We, of course, thank our guest, EJ Hradek, senior reporter, NHL Network. You can see him on NHL Now, which is on Monday through Friday on the NHL Network at 4 p.m. It's an awesome show. It goes around the league. EJ, super knowledgeable. Obviously, it can answer anything and knows all the answers, so we thank him for that. You can check out thebamboozleproject.com. Check them out. Get your NYPB gear as the winter is closing. But I did see some summer gear up on that website, so you can come and get that as well as we hopefully transition into spring sooner than later. Send us your questions, nypbshow@gmail.com, or you can DM us on our Instagram. And that is it for us. We appreciate you tuning in, which on what was a long show for us. Dougie Sticks is going to go take a nap now, I believe, over there in the corner. And we will tune in or talk to you next week.